Killer whales are one of the most widespread marine mammal species on the planet. They're referred to as a cosmopolitan species, appearing in every ocean and almost every sea at some point of the year. As of early 2026, we consider all killer whales or orcas as one species. Although arguments have been put forward to suggest that they are actually multiple species or subspecies of one another. By the way, during this video, I will be using the names killer whales and orcas interchangeably. In fact, throughout all of these videos. So here's the thing: some people call them orcas, some people call them killer whales. It's just they're the same thing. They're just two names for the same animal. The reason why I use both is kind of better for the algorithm of the video. Before we talk about the Bremer Bay orcas, I want to first outline a couple of definitions that I'll be using in these videos and my own interpretation of these definitions when it comes to the context of orcas. So, orcas have at least 10 different ecotypes. So, the term ecotype in animals is not very well defined and should really be applied on a case by case basis, I feel. And in the case of orcas, we're going to use our own interpretation in the definition of an ecotype when describing these. So for us, an ecotype will be an orca that, independent of geography, will have the same kind of life habits, same kind of prey that they go after, same kind of social structure. Probably the most important of all will be that they are genetically distinct. So, just for explanatory purposes, we're going to look at the three ecotypes in the Salish Sea. These ecotypes are the residents, who predate mostly on salmon, the transients, or in other words, bigs, who predate mostly on marine mammals. And the third ecotype are offshore orcas, which we don't know a whole lot about. Now, while at times of the year these ecotypes will occupy the same region, they tend to avoid each other, but they can become in the same area. They choose not to reproduce between each other. They choose to be separate. And this is down to their culture, their lifestyle, and this is very much like pushed by their prey preferences as well. Now, as for a population, the only real difference between populations of the same ecotype are genetics and potentially social structure and acoustics. But for all intents and purposes, if two populations are the same ecotype, they're going to be eating the same prey, they could be living in similar areas, they're going to have a similar social structure, similar core structure, but it won't always be the same. But the big thing is that these are groups of orcas that do not reproduce with one another. They do not interbreed. So the best example of a population is the northern and the southern residents. They are both of the resident ecotype. They both eat salmon, but their habitats have a small amount of overlap as well. And typically, when they've been observed in a similar area, they won't approach each other. In fact, when one will move closer towards the other group will usually will sometimes go back. There's not been too many examples of this, but this is from what I've heard. So they have a completely different social structure. They do not interbreed. Their genetics are very far apart. Yet the way they live is very much similar. So they are the same ecotype, the resident ecotype, but they are two different populations. Now, it's important to make this distinction because I will be referring to both ecotypes and populations during these videos. So it's important to realize, particularly for the Bremer Bay orcas, because I'm going to be mentioning that a distinction where they are not actually not known to be part of a specific ecotype, but yet they are their own community, they are their own group, their own population. Now, to give a comparison, we have southern and northern residents who are both of the same ecotype. They are different populations. We also have big orcas, which are a different ecotype, but they're also a different population. You can't really have two ecotypes in the same population. So today we're going to be talking about the population off the coast of Bremer Bay, Australia. I should specify that we're not going to be talking about type C or Rossi orcas in this video. We may do in a future video. They are a different ecotype that have been potentially spotted in the area a few years ago. And the Bremer Bay orcas, it's not clearly defined what ecotype they are part of. So before we get into anything else, I want to very quickly give some shouts and accreditations. The majority of my base of knowledge that I needed to even start writing this script about Bremer Bay orcas comes from Sarah Shimazu of the Orca Behavior Institute. Without everything I learned from the presentations on Orca Behavior Institute's Patreon presented by Sarah, this video would have taken a lot longer to do, and I would have had to research a complete baseline before I could even get into any of the literature about this. Those presentations were a big help in actually getting me my baseline knowledge. I also want to give a shout to Naturalist Charters for giving me permission to use their footage from social media. Everything of theirs that I use will be captioned, and as a side note, Naturalist Charters is also the operator that Sarah Shimazu uses for her work on the Bremer Bay orcas. And also they have worked with Rebecca Wellard, who we're going to be covering some of her literature during this video as well. The final shouts I want to give are to Jeff Friedman of After the Breach podcast, which Sarah is also on, and Maya's Legacy Whale Watching, because they're going to be lending me some footage to use later on as well, giving me permission to use some footage about a beaked whale hunt. So for all the media sources I'm using in this video, I'm going to actually number them in the captions, and I'm going to leave them numbered in the description with the link to find them. My own footage and photos which I've already used earlier on in the video so far, those won't be numbered because those are provided by myself. So the Bremer Bay Canyon is part of the Bremer Marine Park, which has depths ranging from 15 meters at its shallowest, all the way down to 5,000 meters. Let's talk about the geography of this area and why this is important. So these large, deep underwater canyons are a fantastic mixing zone between two opposing directional currents, plus a current coming from the south. So the current coming from the south is mostly pushed by Antarctic winds. So this is cold water mixing with two opposing direction waters, and this causes mixing and upwelling, which is when nutrients are pushed up into the water column for things like phytoplankton. And phytoplankton are the basis of food chains. And food chains really come from phytoplankton. So if there's a lot of phytoplankton in the water, there's typically going to be a lot of biodiversity. And these particular conditions actually cause incredible biodiversity. And this is all as a result of the geography of the area. So these orcas are mostly known for predating upon beaked whales, but they'll also eat bluefin tuna and squid. They're suggested to be quite generalist in terms of hunting. They're suggested to be some of the healthiest killer whales in the world. They have a large size, both in actual size and in the sense that they are, well fed. When hunting beaked whales, they will sometimes converge and multiple pods may join to hunt. And the hunt may also include multiple kills on beaked whales. So if you don't know much about beaked whales, you may think they're kind of difficult to hunt. You may think they're bigger than they actually are. So a beaked whale, a cuvia beaked whale, which is the most common beaked whale that these orcas predate upon, these grow up to around 7 meters, so somewhat equivalent in size to orcas themselves. And these beaked whales will dive quite deep to find their prey, typically squid. And they'll be down there for a long period of time, and this is the deep ocean. And these are mammals, they need to breathe. So they'll be holding their breath. So when they come back up, they'll be pretty tired, they'll need to breathe. And the orcas will take that opportunity to start trying to stop them getting to the surface and eventually asphyxiate these whales. Now, while we have seen some hunts on the surface for cuvius beaked whales by orcas, it's suspected that quite a lot of them happen subsurface. These orcas have also, on at least 3 occasions as of 2022, and 1 occasion actually in 2025 that was documented, they've been seen hunting pygmy blue whales. And it's pretty gruesome how they do this. So they'll continuously bite the blue whales until the blue whale starts bleeding out. And when it's bleeding, it's going to be suffering a lot of exhaustion and fatigue. So typically 10 to 25 individuals are involved in these hunts, according to the paper that I looked at. And typically this number will be made up of multiple pods coming together to make the hunt. Further reading on the subject, if you're interested in this study that witnessed these, look up Totterell et al. 2022. I will link in the description of the video. In addition to the pre-2022 records, last year in 2025, a large group of around 60 orcas made headlines because they were observed killing another pygmy blue whale. But this is 60 orcas, that's a big group. And when they found this pygmy blue whale, reportedly there were several bite marks all over the whale. So in this population, there are roughly 300 orcas estimated, making them potentially one of the largest orca populations known to us, and potentially the largest in the southern hemisphere outside of Antarctica. There could even be more, due to this being a relatively new population discovered. They've only really been sighted in the last 15-20 years, and the photo IDs are not updated annually. They're not updated year to year like they are in the Salish Sea for southern residents. And as a result, you can have an ID guide which has a particular individual, but there's been substantial changes to their dorsal fin, for instance, or even like a juvenile male has sprouted and now has a massive dorsal fin. And it'll be very difficult to tell who's who because it's changed so much since the last time you saw them. And then there's also individuals that are not seen every year, that are only seen every few years. So because of this, getting a real estimate of the population size is a challenge. It also makes getting an idea of the social structure pretty difficult as well. An up-to-date ID guide is essential as a baseline to even start predicting with some sort of accuracy the population size. A perfect comparison to this would be the southern resident killer whale population in the northwest Pacific region of the USA, where their exact population size is known. Now, partially that is down to them being a small population, but it's also due to a comprehensive photo ID guide that is updated every year and dedicated surveys to make sure they catalogue every individual single orca. Shout out to the Centre for Whale Research, who do an amazing job at this. The Bremer Bay orcas are also seasonal as well, ranging from January to April normally, and this makes it a little bit more difficult to get a population size because you have less time on the water being able to photo ID and catalogue them, and you don't know where they go in the winter. There is an existing photo ID catalogue from 2017 by Rebecca Wellard, but there are potentially orcas that were never recorded in that have been born since then. There's potentially orcas that have died since then. potentially orcas that have sprouted and now they're not so recognizable, or there might even be some that have lost their dorsal fin. There are a few individuals in this population that have lost their dorsal fin. The ID guide actually took 3 years to get out, so it means that some of the photos were only taken in 2014, which is 12 years ago. It's quite a long time to not have updates on particular orcas. What this needs is a more dedicated study. So Rebecca Wellard's ID catalogue uses an ascending numbering system, similar to the northern and southern resident, where the next orca found is given the next available number available. So this system works well in a small population where you know every single individual, or for example in the southern residents where you see them all year round and they're regularly documented, so you know who's related to who. But it doesn't work so well in larger populations where they're a lot more scattered. For example, the bigs use a different system. So I'm going to put on screen an example of the southern residents and the bigs, and the system that I use for these. And so the Bremer Bay catalogue, it works based on what we use for the southern residents. So, for example, you'll see on screen that in the southern residents, the J11s, J31 is the offspring of J11, and then J56 is the offspring of J31. Now, the issue is you would only know that J31 is J11's offspring if you just already knew and you had an ID guide that told you. Now, in contrast, we also have a family of bigs. So here we have T36, and her first offspring, her first known offspring, is T36A. So given a letter, and then T36A, her first calf will be T36A1. So we add a number, and then after we add letter, add number, etc. So for instance, T36's second calf is T36B. Now this does have its own issues, because what will happen in 5 generations time when we have an orca known as T36A1, A2, B3, A6, also known as George. Now, it should be mentioned that the Bremer Bay orcas are given in the ID guide with their nicknames, the names that people have given to them, such as Split Tip. Okay, so I got a little bit off topic there. Rebecca Wellard's ID guide includes left and right dorsal fin and saddle patches. In addition, it also includes left and right eye patches, which has become a much more recent trend now in ID guides, now that we know that eye patches are unique. I'm glad this is the case. When I went to America and saw big orcas, I was able to ID one of them based on the eye patch because I couldn't get a good look at the dorsal fin. There are some photos missing. That's to be expected. These scientists might see a particular individual in the distance once, and before they can get close, they'll vanish. Orcas like to vanish when you're least expecting it. Kind of makes you think maybe being a seal is somewhat of a bit of a stressful existence. Although the seals in this region of Bremer Bay don't have anything to fear from orcas, as they don't seem to be a prey option for them. Also, another shout out to Naturalist Charters. How many is that now? Because they are credited in the ID guide too. I will leave a link to the ID guide in the description. Their social structure's not been extensively studied as of yet, but there is still some stuff that we do know about them. Now, before I can explain this, I need to explain a term, dispersal. So dispersal is when you have a matriline of orcas, which is the mother and her immediate offspring and their immediate offspring. Dispersal is when one or multiple orcas will split apart from this pod and either travel solo or create their own pod. And this most commonly happens with females who have calves. A good example of this is in the big population. So the social structure with Bremer Bay orcas is matrilineal. Now, dispersal does happen within this population, otherwise we'd see pods of about 20 or 30 individuals plus. But as of yet, we do not know the conditions or the timing on when or why dispersal happens within this particular population. Typically, a matroline or pod size is around 7 to 8 individuals. At least that's the number as based on the paper that I read on this subject. Now, this is a larger number than, for example, big orca pods. And potentially a reason for this is the fact that the Bremer Bay matrolines will hunt larger prey, like beaked whales, whereas big orcas will mostly hunt seals and porpoises, and there's less meat on a kill. Whereas larger prey for the Bremer Bay orcas that feeds more mouths, and orcas prey share, so when they hunt a particular prey, they will share that prey within all members of the matroline that were involved in the hunt. So potentially a reason why dispersal is happening with more individuals in a matroline in the Bremer Bay population is because they're hunting larger prey and that there's more to go around. At least that is one potential explanation that I believe could be true. I should state that for the purposes of simplification, I am using the terms matroline and pod interchangeably at this point when it comes to the Bremer Bay orcas. Now we get on to acoustics. Now, I'm no acoustic expert. I should just point that out. Acoustics in killer whales are generally a really heavily focused area of study. In fact, not just killer whales, all cetacean species. We can't help but just be nosy as to working out what they're saying. This is where I say that it's important not to anthropomorphize too much when it comes to understanding the way whales and dolphins work. And I think anthropomorphizing is a way to put it into comparative terms that we can understand. It's simply there to allow us to understand with our own personal frame of reference. It's important to make sure that anthropomorphization does not come into science, that we don't believe that what we are thinking in our own terms is actually what's happening, because it most often isn't. Acoustic studies certainly have challenges, especially when you have no baseline knowledge of acoustics for a population. Social structure is very important when trying to work out acoustics, because certain pods or acoustic clans will have a different repertoire of sounds that they will use, and while different pods or acoustic clans in a population can understand one another, different communities are even further apart than this, and ecotypes are an even more extreme version of this. Hey, that gives me a chance to anthropomorphize for a little bit, so I'm going to give the human equivalent of how far apart these acoustics are within orca matrolines, pods, acoustic clans, and ecotypes. So say, for instance, you are someone who is from New Jersey. So all your matroline speaks with a Jersey accent. Then the matroline of your sister, for instance, they speak like they're from New York City. Then your cousin's matroline, well, they speak like they're from Texas. But hey, you're all just one big pod. There's another pod, and they speak like they're from Australia, a little bit further apart. These two pods, they're in the same acoustic clan. But there's another acoustic clan in your community. Now, they speak French. You remember when you were at school, you learnt a little bit of French. So you can kind of understand a little bit and speak a little bit. And at least they use letters and numbers that you understand. But hey, there's that other community over there. We can't speak to them. They speak Chinese. You have no idea. You have no idea what the letters look like, and you have no idea how to understand the language. You never did a Chinese lesson. But then in this same area, there is that other ecotype. Now, they bark. There is no way you're going to understand them. How are you going to understand an ecotype that barks? So that's an example I like giving when talking about how distant orca acoustics become. If you want me to deep dive into how social structure affects acoustics among killer whales, I will go a lot more into detail when I'm going to be making a video about the northern resident killer whales. If you want to see that video sooner, do let me know in the comments and I'll bump it up the list. Alternatively, if you really, really want to know just right this second, right now, more about social structure or having an effect on acoustics, you just search Orca Lab acoustic paper. Orca Lab are renowned for their acoustic studies, so you'll find what you want, I think. So why do I say all this? It's because, to my knowledge, there has only been a singular study on acoustics within the orca population at the Bremer Bay by Rebecca Wellard et al. In 2015 at Bremer Bay. Leaving that one in. This was around the same time that she was also working on the ID catalogue as well. We didn't really know social interactions that much yet. So their calls are somewhat closely related to Antarctic type A orcas. This initial study found that Bremer Bay orcas have 9 call types. A distinction has to be made for echolocation, which are low frequency clicks, which are basically a toothed whale's inbuilt sonar. Because these are most likely not used for any form of communication. They are almost exclusively used to see the world around and for hunting. So the other types of sounds that orcas make are whistles and pulse calls. Since echolocation is used for hunting and not communication, this study focused on the whistles and pulse calls. So there have been extensive examples of these orcas being extremely social and acquisitive of humans, often approaching boats, doing low passes and making eye contact. You've probably maybe seen videos of these guys before on YouTube. Some amazing clear underwater videos. These are apex predators who are spending time checking us out. And a lot of these interactions are prolonged as well. It's likely that these orcas have not seen many humans before and have only started seeing us in the last 10 or so years, now that we know that they're there. I just want to say how profound it is to have an apex predator taking interest in you, but it's from like an intellectual, curious interest, rather than seeing you potentially on the meal if you fall in. Now, so this is where I get onto a bit of a personal note on the threats towards this population. So this population is going strong and seemingly really healthy. But this is my own personal opinion that I'm saying. I feel we do have to be careful with ecotourism to not oversaturate them. Luckily, the whale watching companies that do go out are extremely respectful and have very strict guidelines on how they can approach or interact with these orcas. They let the orcas control the interaction, which is responsible whale watching. They never cut in front of them. They never chase them. They never get too close to a mother and calf. They stay a respectable distance away. If the orcas want to come close, then that's the orcas that decide to do that. And I think having the tourism industry have an innate desire to observe but not interfere is an extremely good starting point to deal with threats towards these orcas. It means that ecotourism isn't going to be as big a problem as it could. And you've got whale-watching companies who genuinely care about these animals and want what's best for them. They want to see them. Sure, they want their paying customers to see them. But like, the whales always come first. And I absolutely love it when I see whale-watching companies put the well-being of the animal first. By the way, when I was looking at whale watching corridors, whilst I was looking to request footage to use in this video, I did not find a single one that wasn't very clear about being respectful whale watchers. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the Bremer Bay orcas. I'm going to leave loads of links in the description at the bottom. I want to give once again a massive shout to Sarah Shimazu. I want to give a massive shout to Naturalist Charters, Jeff Friedman, Mayor Legacy Whale Watching Tours, which I should say I might be going on one of their boats in July. Excited for that. And I also want to thank you guys for watching. Another acknowledgement that I want to give out is Rebecca Wellard. I went through a lot of her published works as supplementary information for this as well. Have a good rest of your day. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe. We do a monthly podcast. This will be the start of a new series, by the way, but we do not have a release schedule for this. This will be biggest video I've ever done in terms of the amount that I put into this video. I can't do this weekly. These videos will come out when I feel that they are ready to come out, when I feel they are done. So, see you later.